Hey guys, very good morning. Today we are going to discuss introduction 2 Corinthians. Author. Introduction. Author. Paul is the author of this letter. When you look at chapter 1 verse 1 and chapter 10 verse 1, it is stamped with his style and contains more autobiographical material than any of his other writings. Date. The available evidence indicates that year AD 55 is a reasonable estimate for the writing of this letter. From 1 Corinthians chapter 16 verse 5 to 8, it may be concluded that 1 Corinthians was written from Ephesus before Pentecost in the late spring, and that 2 Corinthians may have been written later the same year before the onset of winter. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 13 and 2 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 5 indicate that it was probably written from Macedonia. Recipients. The opening greetings of the letter states that it was addressed to the church in Corinth and to Christians throughout Achaia, the Roman province comprising of all Greece south of Macedonia. Occasion. It seems that Paul wrote as many as 4 letters to the church at Corinth. First one, the letter referred to in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 9, and second one, 1 Corinthians. Third one, severe letter, when you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 3 to 4. Fourth one, 2 Corinthians. After writing 1 Corinthians, Paul continued his ministry at Ephesus until he heard that his letter had not completely accomplished its purpose. A group of men had come to Corinth who presented themselves as apostles. They were false teachers who were challenging, among other things, Paul's personal integrity and his authority as an apostle. In the face of this serious situation, Paul decided to make a quick trip to Corinth. When you look at chapter 12 verse 4 and 13 verse 1 to 2, to see whether he could remedy the situation. The visit turned out to be painful and did not accomplish its purpose. So when Paul returned to Ephesus, he wrote the Corinthians a severe letter out of great distress and anguish of heart and with many tears. When you look at chapter 2 verse 4, probably sending it by Titus. Chapter 12 verse 8. Some identify this letter with 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 13, others think it has been lost. After writing this severe letter, Paul had second thoughts. He was deeply concerned about how the Corinthians might react to it. So after the riot caused by Demetrius and his fellow silversmiths, he left Ephesus and set out for Macedonia by way of Troas. He expected to meet Titus in Troas to get news of the effect of his severe letter on the Corinthian church. But Titus was not there. When you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 12 to 13, still deeply concerned and despite the fact that the Lord had opened up an opportunity to preach the gospel at Troas, Paul said goodbye to the believers there and moved on to Macedonia, where he met Titus. To his relief, the news from the Corinthian church was basically good. The severe letter had brought its intended results. When you look at chapter 7 verse 5 to 16, the encouraging report of Titus of the improved situation at Corinth church. Corinth is the immediate occasion of the writing of 2 Corinthians. How then does one explain the harsh tone of which is so different from the rest of the letter? Some think that when Paul had just completed writing the first 9 chapters, a report came to him that a strong and vocal minority was still causing trouble at Corinth. So before spending off the letter, he added the last 4 chapters to address this troublemaking group. Others hold that chapter 10 to 13 were written some time after Paul had sent the first 9 chapters and that they constitute a separate letter. There is, however, no manuscript evidence that warrants splitting 2 Corinthians into 2 parts. Purposes. Because of the occasion that prompted this letter, Paul had a number of purposes in mind. First one, to express the comfort and joy Paul felt because the Corinthians had responded favorably to his painful letter. And the second one, to let them know about the trouble he went through in the province of Asia. Third one, to explain why he had changed his travel plans. Fourth one, to ask them to forgive the offending party. Fifth one, to warn them not to be yoked together with unbelievers. Sixth one, to explain to them the true nature, its joy, suffering and rewards, and high calling of Christian ministry. This is the so-called great digression, but it turns out to be in some ways the most important section of the letter. Seventh one, to teach the Corinthians about the grace of giving and to make sure that they complete the collection for the poor Christian at Jerusalem. Eighth one, to deal with the minority oppositions in the church. Ninth one, to prepare the Corinthians for his upcoming visit. Structure. The structure of the letter relates primarily to Paul's impending third visit to Corinth. The letter falls naturally into three sections. First one, Paul explained the reason for the changes in his itinerary. Second, Paul encourages the Corinthians to complete their collection in preparation for his arrival. Third one, Paul stresses the certainty of his coming, his authenticity as an apostle, and his readiness to exercise discipline if necessary. Unity. Some have questioned the unity of this letter, but it forms a coherent whole. As the structure above shows, tradition has been unanimous in affirming its unity. The early church fathers' example knew the letter only in its present form. Furthermore, none of the early Greek manuscripts breaks up the book. 2 Corinthians we outline. Total we have 13 chapters. First one, chapter 1 to 7, we can see apologetic, Paul's explanation of his conduct and apostolic ministry. Under that we can discuss greetings, thanksgiving for divine comfort in affliction, the integrity of Paul's motives and conduct, forgiving the offending party at Corinth, God's direction in ministry, the Corinthian believers a letter from Christ, seeing the glory of God with unveiled faces, treasure in clay jars, the prospect of death and what it means for the Christian, the ministry of reconciliation, a spiritual father appeal to his children, the meeting with Titus. And second one, chapter 8 to 9, hortatory, the collection for the Christian Jerusalem, generosity encouraged, Titus and his companions sent to Corinth, results of generous giving, and polemical, chapter 10 to 13, Paul's vindication of his apostolic authority, Paul's defense of his apostolic authority and the area of his mission, Paul forced into foolish boasting, final warnings, and chapter 13 is final warning, and conclusion, final greetings and benediction. So these are the 13 chapters we can see in 2 Corinthians chapters. So in coming days we will discuss chapter by chapter in our Bible study. God bless you. Thank you.